Hello again, and good morning. So, today's footage, I will be doing some gluing, putting the carpet on the speaker boxes. This is one of the least desirable things that have to be done with the speakers, but I do like the look of the carpet, and I like the way they sound when they're carpeted, so it is what I will do. So I'm going to set the plywood cutting station up as kind of a gluing table, essentially, and that worked out pretty well for the most part. I debated whether I should put some slats down, and I debated whether I should actually attach the slats to the runners, to the grid rails, but I ended up not, and that was definitely a mistake. I spent more time than I should have moving them, adjusting them, whatnot. So it is what it is, though. The process is pretty simple. You cut a piece of carpet and put your speaker on it and trim it down, and I ended up being able to. So I ran into a challenge where the original purchose was, or the original idea was to build 4 full range speakers. Then I was going to borrow my old pair of subs from the friend that bought them from us, and then along the way we decided that it would be easier and more advantageous in the long run if we just built a set of subs for ourselves, so that we just had a full sound system and didn't have to worry about it, because if we borrowed them, then obviously we wouldn't have them. So I ended up being able to get the fabric for the most part to finish the speakers out of what I originally ordered, because I always order extra, and I knew I needed to do some equipment boxes. So I figured out how much I needed for the original 4 speakers, and then a little bit of extra for those for the equipment boxes, and I ended up being able to basically run the carpet. So like the strip I'm cutting here is going to be for one of the full range boxes, and then that leaves a nice wide strip that I can use to take the sub box and at least get the carpet around the outside and the back. And then I'm figuring out the faces, so we're going to cut some pieces to set aside for the full range faces. So the full range speakers at this point, as of today, are completely done and tested and fully functional, and they definitely sound amazing. We decided for sure that the way that I've built them with the attenuators, since I have complete control over the individual volume levels of each speaker, I can actually basically make the system sound like there is a sub, for all intents and purposes. And so the eventual goal is to build another 4, so I have a total of 8, and that will actually be a sufficient system for most rooms. Adding the 2 15-inch subs will round things off for larger rooms, but I'm not actually sure that I need to build a second pair of 15-inch subs. just because the system sounds good enough. So we'll see if we end up ever doing a room where I think, man, I wish I had just a little bit more bass in here. Then I guess I'll build another pair of subs. And if not, I might get a slightly more powerful sub and replace the woofers in these boxes, because the speakers were designed with the amp that was purchased was designed to specifically handle 4 ohms, so that I'd have 2 speakers per channel. And for the full range, the amp was chosen based on its 2 ohm rating, so that I could have 4 speakers per channel. That's one of the things I like about the QSC amplifiers, is that they're very, very solidly built, and they've always sounded amazing, and sound quality is definitely the thing that I go for. So these are the full range speaker is a Class AB amplifier, so it is amplifying this music as basically as purely as possible, because I don't think I've ever actually seen a straight Class A amplifier which doesn't have any kind of modification to the sound at all. Class AB is essentially running a minor modification to make it slightly more efficient. I've never heard a Class A amplifier, so I don't know that it really is that big of a difference, enough to worry about. But I have heard other amplifiers, Class D and H and things, and I can tell a difference, and I don't like the difference that's there. Those amplifiers have a pretty huge advantage, that they actually weigh less. Like they can weigh up to like half, sometimes even less, than an AB amplifier that's rated at the same power rating. But they do that because they're changing how they're actually processing the sound. I'm not going to pretend I fully understand all of that, but I know that trade-off in sound quality is not something that I personally like to hear out of my sound system. So that's my 2 bits on the on the ratings. So contact cement is it's a pretty nasty stuff. It does its job, but it's not something you want to breathe. So you're supposed to use it in a well ventilated area. Technically, you should be wearing a mask. I can't work with a mask very well because I wear glasses, and as much as I would love to not wear glasses, and I actually hate wearing glasses, the simple fact of the matter is that I am stuck wearing glasses. So things that make glasses fog are always a problem, and face masks and respirators are definitely a problem. So someday I need to find some solution to that. And get some kind of face shield type respirator, I guess. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out. But my solution was to set up a couple of box fans and essentially create an exhaust system. And for the most part, it actually worked quite well. There were only occasional times where I could smell the glue, and that was usually while I was directly applying it. The secondary advantage that the fans had was that they actually helped the glue dry faster, which created a benefit of taking less time to do everything, but it also made it much harder to gauge when to actually glue things, and that comes into play. I had to get a second can of cement after I started on the subs, and that second can was clearly a different batch. The viscosity was so far different, and it was just runny. It was compared to this batch, it was watery, and that made a little bit of a challenge because it would drip off the brush a lot more, and that was quite frustrating to work through. There were several times I had to go back and reapply it to make sure that things were sufficient, because it would dry. Oddly enough, it was runnier, but it would dry faster. And contact cement is the way it works is you apply it to one surface, and it adheres itself to that surface as it dries, and then you apply it to another surface, and it adheres itself to the surface as it dries there. And then when you connect those two, it bonds itself to the two different surfaces, so it creates a chemical bond and glues everything. But if it's too wet, it doesn't stick at all, and it just becomes sloppy and messy. And if it's too dry, it doesn't stick at all, and it just comes off. So it's a little bit finicky, but it is pretty easy to work with, all things considered. So like I said, the process is pretty straightforward. I try to focus around the edges first, so that if there is a little bit of drying issues, the edges are where the strongest bond will ideally be. You saw my trick to cutting things to size is I overlap them and then use a big 12-inch steel spackle spreader drywall. I cannot for the life of me think of what it's called. Anyway, and then I just run the blade along that, and this is that lip that I was mentioning that is partially an aesthetic thing, but it also creates a little bit of protection for the horns and things. So there's no, speakers, when I stack them and store them, I put them face to face, and so this lip butts up against the other lip for the other speaker, and it creates a nice protection, so I don't have to worry about the hardware getting damaged in shipping. I'm just cleaning off the inside edge of it, and then by the time I got that stuff done, since I'd painted that first, I can then start working on the back. And you start with butting the seams up against each other, and then I can work my way into the center. And occasionally you get a little bit of a ripple, because sometimes the carpet doesn't cut exactly. It's one of the pieces, since they're overlapped, is just slightly oversized. And so I'm just positioning the carpet for the face now and trimming that to size. Then I'll glue it in place and then cut the holes out. That actually helps give me a few places I can grab it without having to worry about grabbing the glue. And an interesting trick, I don't remember how I figured this out, but if you take one of the blades and run it around wherever the speaker holes are, the baffle holes, you run that around with a little bit of pressure, it actually creates a nice mark so you can see exactly where it is that you need to glue. I figured here, to speed things up a little bit, I would take the first one that I just cut and then trim a slightly oversized piece and cut three more of them, so they're close to what they need to be, because it's easier to deal with if you're only trying to trim off like half an inch versus 6 or 7 or 10 inches or whatever. And the back here, this is one of those times where I mentioned that sometimes I had to re-glue things. I let it dry a little too long, so I had to re-wet that. But then, same thing here, I just go around the edges and paint it in. We've built a lot of speakers over the years, and I've had to build them in some funny places because I decided to do them at odd times of the year. I knew we had a need to build a pair of subs back in the day. This was 2009, I think, 2008, somewhere around there, and I was living in an apartment in Cache Valley, and I had no way to do speaker boxes. I'd always done them in my dad's garage, which was great because nobody cared. No fumes to deal with. Just open the garage door, let the air blow out. It was mostly, I usually built them in the spring or summer, and so it was usually warm enough that I didn't have to think about it or worry about it. But this particular time we were building them in the middle of winter for some reason. And I'm trying to remember, I think it was that we had an event for USU that we'd been hired to do. Oh, right. Nope. It was, it was it was a company dinner, a company party dinner that we had been asked to DJ. And so we knew that it was going to be in the soccer field, the indoor soccer field at USU. It was for the cheese plant in Cache Valley, Schreiber. Both Nick and I worked there at the time, and we wanted this extra subs so that we had a better sound. That's what it was, and so I decided to build them. It happened to be winter. Sorry, I mean this was 15 years ago, but we happened to meet some guys that had a band, and they were interested in having us build speakers for them, and so we were talking about it, and they were interested in the process and what's involved, and it came up during this conversation that we needed a place to do this where we could actually glue them, and not wanting to be that guy that gets people in trouble and hides things and whatever. I told him straight up, I was if we use contact cement, it needs to be warm when it's applied, and it needs to be warm for about 2 days or so after it dries, so that it can cure properly and have everything adhere. And they were like, yeah, we've got this space. It's in the basement of this business, and we pretty much just have free run of the place, and there's plenty of space. There's like a 30 by 60 room that you could totally use to just build them with. And we were like, oh, sweet, all right. So we worked out a deal. I was going to build them a pair of speakers at cost, and they were going to let me use their room and build this set first, and then do the event and come back and build their speakers. And I was like, I'm totally down with this. This is awesome. So we were doing this, and it was all after hours was when we were able to go do it. So we were working from like We'd usually get off work around 11, I think, and we'd go for 3 or 4 hours, and we'd work on cutting boxes and whatnot, and things were going great up until we started gluing, and there hadn't been any issues, but we had all the speakers all glued together, and we took them and just kind of set them off to the side and cleaned things up a little bit, and then went home for the night and crashed. And I woke up and had like 4 different messages from these guys, and they were irate is the kindest word I can use. The main contact was kind of going off the handle, and apparently the glue didn't dry fast enough, and what they didn't know or didn't mention was the room that I was working in had a equipment room attached to it. That equipment room happened to be right next to where we put the speakers to cure for the night. So the contact cement was curing, and the fumes from this were getting pulled straight into the furnace air conditioning room. And not only was that a safety hazard, because contact cement fumes are flammable if in the right concentration, but it meant that was then blowing contact cement fumes throughout this entire building. And the tenants of the businesses upstairs were complaining of the smell, and that they were getting headaches and having issues from that. So they contacted the landlord, who then contacted these guys and basically said, hey, this is not acceptable, and you guys need to be out of here now. So even trying to not be that guy, I ended up ultimately technically being that guy. And that was pretty crummy. I could have done things better. They could have done things better. It is what it is. They got built. It's probably needless to say they did not have me build them another a set. I don't know where they are. I don't know what they're doing. Don't know if their band ever took off. That's just an interesting memory. We had a pretty good time while we were building the speakers. I mean, I remember a photo of Nick actually being inside one of the sub boxes, and then we closed it up and he was inside of it, just because they were big enough that you could actually climb inside one. Yeah, it was a good time up until it wasn't. So this one went together pretty much the same as the other one, though. They're pretty, like I said, pretty straightforward, and it was kind of interesting to see how much of what I was working on just kind of came back from previous memory, and there were a few mistakes that I made and things that I had forgotten about how to make this process a little bit smoother. So by the time I finished the last boxes, it was definitely going fairly well. The equipment boxes are always the hard ones because they have more complex pieces. Like the angled equipment boxes, for instance, are going to be quite the challenge. On the one hand, they're easy because it's just one piece that you get to wrap, but then you have a lot of seams to try and deal with as far as making that wrap happen. And there's a lot of waiting. I would try and work on other stuff. while I was, while I was waiting for that glue to dry, because the only thing a little more boring than watching paint dry is waiting for glue to dry. So I was trying to basically working on fitting some of the faceplates for the other pieces. And then I would come back and test it, and if it was dry enough, then I was able to get things together. And it definitely makes the boxes look complete, I guess would be the right phrase. And what I'm doing here is occasionally I still get some slight differences, and so one of the tricks that you can do is I've got another piece over here that was trimmed off that's got some contact cement on it, and as long as that's still kind of tacky, then I can use that as little scrap pieces to fill in gaps if there are any. Helps hide the mistakes. But that's where we're going to end for the day, so I brought both of them back in and left the fans running all night to help make sure they dried. But thank you, as always, for your time. God bless you and yours, and stay safe and healthy out there.